We're live.
Okay, here we are. Part 2. The long-awaited part 2. And we realize this is not the part 2 that we promised. And we're sorry for that. But anyway, spider friends, freaks, geeks, fiends, weirdos, all of you. Thank you so much. For those of you who don't know, we released part 1. We started a series on heating and lighting as it pertains to specifically tarantula husbandry. And in our introductory video, we kind of explained why we're doing it. In part 1, we talked a little more specifically, we kind of tackled some of the myths, some of the misunderstandings that have kind of ruled or governed the approach to tarantula husbandry, at least in the United States. I feel so bold as to say this kind of spreads beyond the United States. Doesn't matter. But there's a lot of that. So if you haven't seen part 1 yet, please check out part 1. It's a little more scripted, a little more YouTube-y, if you will.
Professional.
Professional, sure. And then we kind of dive into the source of some of the misunderstandings of animal science.
Heating and
lighting, right. And so we're going to talk about what we realized after the release of part 1. We let that kind of simmer a little bit, and we received some feedback, and we thought about what we said, because what we're saying in largely is it's not the norm, right? And so what we wanted to give it a minute and just kind of see what the response would be, right? We feel very confident in what we're saying. However, Martial Arachnids, again, is a business, and even though we started the business under different pretenses of like we're not going to operate as a standard business, we wanted to see the reaction, and the feedback we got was positive. But there were some questions, and we really want to focus on those questions, okay? Because undoubtedly those questions are going to be questions that other people we don't hear from have. And what we realized is that like we need to talk about the foundation, and we need to talk about the approach, we need to talk about animal science, and we need to talk about natural history before we can even get into why we would even consider applying heating elements to the spiders and their response to it. And I'm just going to say it right off the bat. Every situation does not call for a heating element. The use of heating elements depends on many, many factors, okay? Starting with the species. What is it? And we're going to talk about this. The natural history of the spider. Where does it come from? What is it exposed to, right? And then the second part of that is your parameters. Where do you live? Where that animal is going to be established or set up. What happens? Are there seasonal changes where you live? Are there seasonal changes where the animal lives? Right? So all of these things determine, and this is not just limited to tarantulas, guys. The tarantula hobby is, and yes, I'm going to say it, is about 30 years behind as far as husbandry goes. But this is not limited to just tarantulas. This is all ectotherms, amphibians, reptiles, mammals. It doesn't matter, right? These animals are the product of an evolutionary process. They're the product of their environment. So the more we understand their environment, the more we can kind of adjust and make these decisions on like, okay, how do I provide this animal these parameters, right? And a lot of you will find this boring. A lot of you will be like, I don't want my husbandry experience to be this complex. When guys, it's really not complex, and I think you'll understand this by the end of this series. But it's something that we don't talk about, and we should. And we're going to talk about our experience and why we feel this way and where this is coming from, because we think that's very important. So backing up, what we're going to do today is we're just going to talk about natural history, and we're going to talk about 2 species in particular. So Martial Arachnids was founded on the species of Poecilotheria metallica. That species put us on the map. That allowed us breeding that species allowed us to be a business. Okay, I made some financial decisions after reproducing that species, and it just kind of set the. I did. Quick background before we get into that. I was an arachnophobe almost my whole life up until a few years ago. I didn't like spiders. I wanted nothing to do with them. And my background was in herps, reptiles and amphibians, which are also ectotherms, right? And right before I got into spiders, I started a career in AZA, or zoos and aquarium science. And so, but right off the bat, what I was hearing about these animals didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. It was very evident that what I was hearing was the product of a very narrow experience that was clearly dated. Okay. And so I kept quiet. I kept to myself for many, many years. I didn't reach out. I didn't engage with the community. I just acquired my animals. And if Jess, can you pull up that picture?
Yeah.
We got a lot of pictures. Guys, this is very informal and we got a lot to show you. So bear with us. But Jess is going to show you some pictures throughout the whole video. But anyway, point being, I did my own thing. I didn't listen to any of the big names. I didn't listen to any of the parameters that we had. No, that one right there.
This one?
Yep. Can they see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what you're looking at here is how martial arachnids started. This is martial arachnids. And so I kept a few species, but someone at the time told me about this blue spider. Okay. And they said it's really hard to breed. They're really hard to, defensive,
really hard to breed in captivity.
Really hard to breed in captivity, right? Not a lot is understood about them. And at the time, knowing nothing about arachnids, my ego kicked in, I'll be honest. And I said, I can do it. I'll figure it out. So I spent a lot of time doing research. And again, this was prior to my involvement in zoos and aquariums. I researched everything I could, every resource on the internet. I promise you, I've read it. Every literature, every piece of literature to do with this species, I read it. And what I was reading, a lot of it didn't make a whole lot of sense. A lot of it didn't help me, but some of it did. And I clung to that. Are they seeing this?
Mm-hmm.
So here's a resource from Tarantulas UK. This is not my work. But these two pictures that Jessica's about to show you is all I had to go off of with this species. Okay. And what you're looking at is a graph of what happens in nature. What is the animal exposed to seasonally, yearly, daily, etc. Right? And thankfully, technology has evolved so much that in real time, I can almost see what the animals are exposed to in nature. Right? So I saw this graph and I said, okay, so what do we know about the animal? And we're going to do this in real time with you guys. So you have to know where we're coming from to really understand this process and why we're so passionate about it. Okay. So anyway, what I saw when I was looking at this information is, okay, these animals are clearly triggered by a seasonal change. Okay. And the whole genus Imposilitharia, they have an extra instar. Now, I was curious to that, not knowing really what that meant or why they did that. I asked myself, well, why are they so different? Why do they have that extra instar when they're born before they start consuming food? Well, if you just slow down and you think about it, if you look at the graph that Jessica just had pulled up, what it shows is a difference in temperature. And guys, we're talking about ectotherms here, and we'll talk about this more in a minute. 5 degrees to an ectotherm is a huge deal. Okay. So, but moving forward, what it shows is a decrease in temperature and an increase in precipitation by quite a bit. If you don't know, India, geographically speaking, would be a desert if not for the monsoon season. That monsoon season dictates a lot of animal behavior. Okay. So what I saw when I was looking at that is, okay, the temperature drops, temperature increases. And so I started playing with those temperatures, right? And I realized real quickly that to meet these parameters, I could not follow what the hobby was telling me to do, which was heat lamps are bad, thermoregulate. These animals are incapable of thermoregulation. etc.
High
Right?
humidity is bad.
Yeah, high humidity, rainfall, blah blah blah. All that is bad. Okay, all right. So I threw that shit out the window, right? And I looked at what was in front of me, right? So I said, okay, see these little track lights here. It was like, okay, that's suspended from the enclosure. I'm going to use that to give them that bump in temperature. And if you notice, if you look real closely, that animal is responding to that stimulus. To me, what that said was, okay, they're doing that in nature. They're going to do that in captivity. And sure enough, here she is. This is the animal that produced the sac for me. Okay.
You can't really see in this particular photograph, but she has a good at least 8 to 10 inches of this hollow stump here to go down if she needed to escape from that lighter heat, but she is choosing to stand right under those beams.
So knowing what I knew about ectotherms, I knew that giving them the choice, and again, we're going to elaborate this on this later, giving them that choice to warm their bodies or cool their bodies, I already knew that. Okay, because again, I worked with ectotherms, and I confirmed that later in my work with zoos and aquariums. But I said, give the animal the choice, right? This is in a basement. This is in a basement in Nebraska. So what I knew is at night, I could get those nightly drops that would cool down. And then when the animal wanted to, I could provide her with a thermal gradient, which again happens in nature. And she could choose to warm her body, right? So to me, an ectotherm is not going to produce eggs or, it takes energy to do these biological functions, which for an ectotherm means heat. Okay.
Metabolic function.
Metabolic function, correct, right. Mm-hmm. So anyway, long story, we are going way off track here, but it's relevant because I want to show you guys the process I took knowing nothing about spiders. In fact, being afraid of spiders. I took all of this information and I turned it into like a husbandry protocol. Okay. And I did it. I made babies, right? And I knew nothing about them. I did something that everyone said was hard to do, which I know people do it without half this work. That's not the point. The point is that I did it taking the animal's natural history into account, right? And so let's get back on track. Let's define natural history. Natural history is the organism's interaction with its environment. Okay, and that includes its interaction with flora, with fauna, with the climate.
Its physiology and its behavior.
Yes.
Very importantly, yes.
Yes. So like I said earlier, these animals are the product of an evolutionary process. Okay. So, and this isn't hard. This is just like understanding how animals are animals, right? And they're animals because they are the product of their environment. Okay. That can include color, that can include, behavior, like the development of venom, or in the Poecilotheria case, the development of an extra instar. Okay, so the extra instar, I didn't even talk about that. I got way off track. That extra instar correlates, the animals will incubate when it's hot and dry. They'll incubate their eggs, the animals will hatch, and then that extra instar gets them to the wet, cool season when food is plentiful. We all know that a lot of prey items produce when it's wet, when it's a monsoon season, right? So my animals literally confirmed this to a T. It was 6 months on the dot. She raised her babies. They hatched. Jess, I can actually show you a picture of those babies. Yes. They hatched when it was nice and hot. They had a hot spot of about 100 degrees. Okay, and that's how I found those babies. They all came out to bask, right? And then that took them, that extra instar, to when seasonally it would be cool and wet, when food would be plentiful. So if you think about that, I'll have to just show you if you can find it. There it is. Yep, there they are. That's how I found them. And I found them right when it started to start to cool and start raining. It was about in April is when I found them. Okay. And that's what I found. And above them, there's a heat lamp that is suspended above the enclosure. So, point being, understanding what governs the animal's behavior and anatomy and physiology really helps you understand why the animal might behave in captivity. So I'm going to throw this out there too, because this needs to be said. Just because you take that animal and you put it in a box in your closet or wherever the animal's going to live, you do not get rid of 100 million years of evolution. Okay, you're not going to change that overnight. Just because they're in captivity, you do not change what is ingrained in their DNA.
Instinct.
Yeah, you do not change instinct or any. Now, these animals are very adaptable. There's science that supports that, and again, we've mentioned that that's what is often taken advantage of in captivity. But you don't change the evolutionary prowess. You do not. Okay, so we have to understand that. We can subject them to anthropomorphism and we can think, oh, they're cute, or oh, they love me, or oh, they adapt. And you don't change nature. Okay, they are the product of their environment, and we are not going to change that. They're not domestic cats. They're not domestic dogs. They're wild animals. Just because they're in your box in your home, they're still wild animals. Okay, and we have to understand that. So Anyway, I have to get all this out, guys, because these are questions that came up from part one, and we didn't reiterate on that, so we have to talk about it. Okay,
let's get into it.
Let's get into it. So yeah, let's get into it. So you want to do Versicolor first?
Yeah.
So Versicolor is one of our best sellers. They're one of the most popular and most beautiful animals, period. But there's also a lot that's misunderstood about that species. So what we want to do is we want to create a kind of like things you can do on your own. Just help me out. Like things you determining this natural history.
Yeah, some background knowledge you should have before you ever think about acquiring a Versicolor.
Yes. Yes. And this is one step to take. Okay. Taking keepers' experience into consideration is valid. Yes. You should do that, whether it's me, whether it's Tom Moran, whether it's Richard Stewart, whether it's any random keeper on a Facebook group. You should take that into consideration. Yes. And what they're saying is valid to a point. So
yes. So we're going to show sort of the basics as well as some more intricate details on how we research natural history for any species that we keep. Versicolor just being a really good example because they're so common and because there's a ton of information on them.
Right. And yeah, and again, we don't look up care guides or species specific anything. That's not what we do. Right. So we're just going to start with Versicolor, and then we'll go from there. Yep, and we'll share with you some helpful resources.
Yes, we're going to keep a list of sources that we keep referring back to here. So this is sort of what we would begin taking notes with. We would keep a list of our sources that we got our information from, and we would start generating a list of parameters, topics that we need to keep track of when we are keeping the species in captivity.
Yeah, and that's pretty basic, guys. Really, I mean, it's just like climate, temperature, what's the textures, what type of structures are they inhabiting?
Yes,
things like that. It's very simple, and that's what we can't hit that home enough, guys. Is how simple this is.
Right.
You just take some out of the box thinking. It's like rerouting how we approach caring for the animals that we're caring for. And this works for all animals, not just spiders.
You don't need to have a biology background like both of us do.
No,
you simply need to just have access to the internet. Honestly.
Yep.
So yeah, you want to go over some of the sources we use usually?
Sure. Yep. So the biggest thing for us is understanding the weather, the climate. We start there first. I mean, and then we kind of hone in, we kind of narrow it down to locale specifics, but let's just go to weather.com because we all have access to that. We ignore all the insanity that is weather.com and we just search for what we're going for. So we happen to know, I'm going to butcher the name, but we know that animals have been spotted in is it Preacher?
Tell me how to spell it. Do you know how to spell it?
Lapre. So Caribbean Versicolor is native to Martinique, and then they've also been spotted off of
yes, okay. There we go.
There it is.
For sure,
okay.
Yes.
Okay. So you can find that pretty easy. we talked about going on YouTube and showing you guys videos that show these animals in the native habitat, but we're a little bit worried. We don't know how that works with copyright or anything like that.
Yeah, we're just going to play it safe and not show other YouTube footage yet anyway.
Yep. So what we'll just tell you is YouTube is a wonderful resource if you know the keywords to use. So a lot of it is utilizing not their common name, but their Latin name. This is why Latin names are important, right? So Carabina versicolor, natural habitat, or wild,
natural history, climate.
Yeah, more like wild habitat.
Yeah.
And we know that if you do that, at least for this species in particular, there are plenty of videos that show these animals in their native environment. So you get an idea of what's happening. And take note of the way the foliage moves, the way this, wherever the animal's found, like where the sun is hitting that. Are they in shade? What are they taking refuge in? Things like that, things to note, right? Is it raining? Are they out during the day? Are they out in the evening? Right.
So tarantupedia.com.
Well, hold on. So
okay.
So we're talking about versicolor,
Yeah.
right? So this locale, this place, which is on the northwestern part of the island.
Let's look.
I believe. I'm pretty confident about that. I think we can Google. I think we're allowed to Google, and then we can pull up those images, right? I think we can do that. God, this looks beautiful. Like if you're gonna go anywhere, go here. Like this is amazing. This is an amazing place. But there's like, it's pretty thick, it's pretty dense. But yes, that part of the island, the northern part of the island. And I want people to note too that like there's also small things to take into consideration, like microclimates, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Meaning like you have your large biome, and then like microclimate would be like in a cave or on a side of a mountain that doesn't receive as much sunlight, right? So like what's happening there? But I mean, this is typical habitat, right? So I want people to note when they're looking at this, look at how much shade. We know the animals are boreal, right? So let's determine their physiology, their anatomy. They are arboreal animals, meaning they live in trees, right? So I want people to notice too, like look at how, and this will undoubtedly change during the day, but look at how the sun hits these trees. You'll notice that there's parts of shade, there's parts of sun, okay? And having been in some of these places myself, I will tell you that temperature and like what these animals have access to changes throughout the day to a degree. There's a set established temperature, and when you're looking at that, which for Caribbean versicolor is actually very simple. It's basically 75 to 85, like all year round. And the weather, again, this weather information will tell us that. Like this, I've been looking at this for years. This doesn't change. This place is amazing, right? That's pretty much it, like all the time. So we're very adamant about saying like this species really doesn't experience temperatures in below 70 degrees. They just don't. And that, again, that is how they have evolved to survive in their environment, right? So while they will absolutely survive in temps below that for short periods of time, it's not natural. Okay, so like when you look at this, what you can clearly see is like, well, that's a very narrow range of temperatures. And I assure you guys, if you're on the ground or if you're in the canopy, these temperatures and these humidity levels really don't change that much. It's about the same. We talked about the microclimates, but that's a good range. One thing we want to say is like, don't obsess over a specific number. Okay, I think people are getting us wrong when we're saying that. Okay, but just looking at this and knowing this range tells you a lot about the animal and things they're going to experience.
Okay, so let's talk about what we are researching now with the weather and the climate. The weather would refer to like what's going on right now, like the current conditions. The climate would be more like a yearly overall, trend in what the weather does from month to month or quarter to quarter. So we can see that the current weather is they're experiencing the same typical temperatures as what you would expect for January in Martinique. a high of mid to low 80s and a low of low 70s. So let's add temperature to our topics. So we're getting this information here on Google from, I believe this is from the NOAA. Yes. So this is a very reliable resource.
Yeah. And guys, finding out this locale specifically, again, you can find this on YouTube. Just YouTube the species or Google them, and then you can find this. I think it's La Preacher. I'm gonna butcher it, but like
it's like
finding that there are actual like in that park. I'm telling you right now, there are photos of the animals like on the sign, right? That says like "Welcome to so and so park," and like there's animals like hanging out right there. So that's how we know this information, right? And it just takes a few minutes Googling, and you'll find it.
Right.
Okay. So we know there are animals there.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
So let's see. Throughout the year, it looks like we have
So let's find an average.
Yeah, mid to upper 80s throughout the year. There's not a ton of seasonal variation for temperatures anyway. So we can summarize that with mid-high 80s to, and then our lows are low to mid 70s throughout the year even.
Yeah. And what's important to note, guys, what happens during the day, okay? It doesn't stay 70 degrees at all, okay? It goes up. And then the animals undoubtedly have access to sunlight. And we know the sun heats things up, okay? So they have access. And this is what we're always talking about, thermal gradients, right? They have access. They can choose what they want to do with themselves in this environment, okay?
So what's something else we want to research with the species? Humidity, rainfall?
Yep,
like
precipitation.
Yes, precipitation. So let's type humidity, precipitation.
And while Jess is doing that, I'm just gonna keep rambling. So there's a real misconception with like the Avicularia genus with humidity, rainfall, and airflow, right? A lot of people say, I mist once a week. I mist twice a week. I don't mist at all. I only overflow the water dish. Like there's very rigid, like you must do this, you know, or like humidity or rainfall or whatever in general is harmful to these animals. And I'm going to come out and say it, that is incorrect. Okay. That's a very simplified view of looking at the way this all works. So
looking at natural history, looking at the way they interact with their environment.
Correct. So with a lot of Avicularia, we're going to kind of stray away from Carabina for a second. It rains every single day in the morning there. I personally have not been to, let's just say, Peru. That's where a lot of Avicularia species are found. But it rains every day. And the lowest yearly humidity recordings. And if you guys want to see this, I can bug my buddy. He went for work when I worked with him at the zoo, and he sent me all these pictures. Is like 86%. Okay, so the humidity is very high. The difference between the jungle of Peru or the cliffs, if you will, of Martinique is that there's air movement. It doesn't matter if you're on the ground or if you're 30 feet in a tree in the canopy. The humidity level, I promise you, is ungodly high. Okay, like the humidity's high and it rains every day in a lot of these places. The difference is the air moves. Okay, so I don't know where I'm going with that. I'm just saying that like if the air is moving and there's air exchange,
there is a complex relationship.
Yes,
between those two things.
It's not just you need to do this once a week or don't do this at all. Like here's the other thing too, guys. The animals in response to fresh rain, water, or mist, that is a sensory cue for them. That is how these animals hydrate themselves in nature. I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but again, there's a lot to say. Okay, just take it over.
Anyway, let's look at humidity and precipitation, at least on a climate level and a weather like a current weather based viewpoint of that. So from the NOAA, which I believe is the National Oceanic and Aeronautic Administration, something like that. Anyway, you can see there's a little bit of seasonal variation, actually quite a bit. I mean, but they still experience easily 1 out of every 3 to 4 days a month rainfall in the drier periods, and every other day constant rainfall in the more the wet periods. So they experience quite a bit of fresh water droplets in their native environment. Just today, the humidity was a good 86%, at least in our site locality there at the northern end of Martinique. Let's see.
I think it's important to say too that, like, guys, we don't, like, we personally don't moderate our humidity levels. We mist every day for the animals to react and have fresh droplets, but like, we're not actively, like, we have to maintain this number, because that would be almost impossible for us, and our animals do really well. So we're not saying, we have to be very clear about this. We're not saying you must maintain this percentage, but you should know, like, knowing parameters, both temperature and humidity levels for these ectotherms, these equatorial animals, like, matters, and to like completely dismiss it, we think is incredibly irresponsible too. Like, I just want to throw that out there, right? Because I know a lot of people right now are going to say, oh, well, you have to maintain 86% humidity. No, like, that's not what we're saying, but give the animals the opportunity to like have fresh droplets. And okay, Jess is doing something. I'm just relax is all I'm trying to say.
We never aim for a specific temperature, and definitely not a specific humidity level for any of our animals, honestly.
But a range.
Yes, a range. And we do monitor physical water droplets. Anyway, this video is supposed to be about eating and lighting.
Yep. Yeah, so, but you're right. That's a whole other series in and of itself.
Stop it.
Okay.
As far as temperature ranges, weatherspark.com is one of our favorite sources for yearly climate data for all of these localities. There's a ton of information on weatherspark.com. It'll give you a yearly viewpoint as well as seasonal information. So I believe, let's see, it doesn't say here what the type locality is for this wherever we're measuring in Martinique, but the average temperature anyway, you can see here, ranges from 83 to 88 as a high temp during the day, and lows no lower than 72 degrees. This is another great resource for setting your baseline temperatures and setting your maximum temperature for that species. It'll even give you like mid-range averages too. High temp and low.
Can you scroll down a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, so something I want to point out here too is ignoring this comfortable and whatever.
Yeah, this is for tourism.
This is irrelevant. This is for people. We're annoying. But like, look what happens in the afternoon. So what that means is, like, the sun is at its highest peak. The sun's moving throughout the sky. What's important to take away from this is that things change. Okay. So like, going further in your husbandry or your welfare, like, it doesn't stay the same. And to think that these animals are not capitalizing on these changes throughout the day at that specific time is ridiculous. Because I'm going to tell you right now, they absolutely are. Okay. And they do it in captivity, and we see it. This is parallel.
But the point is that they have the opportunity to capitalize on these temperatures.
You're right. Yeah, that's a big thing. They have the opportunity. And so that's why we're always preaching, give them the choice to do so,
right? Which
involves thermal gradients.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Let's see. Cover. We have a bunch of different parameters we can view on WeatherSpark: precipitation, average daily chance of precipitation throughout the year, monthly rainfall, hours of daylight. Even that, we didn't even start talking about lighting yet.
Yeah, so let's just kind of okay. Like, we talked about it in part two. Like,
part one.
I actually, and is it part one?
This is part two.
Okay. In part one, I can't believe we have to talk about this. But like, daylight, guys, photo period. Okay, the sun goes up, the sun goes down. Okay, in that time, there's a lot of things that happen, and this graph is clearly indicating that, and these animals respond to those things.
Yes.
So
tarantulas are by definition either nocturnal or crepuscular animals. They're not cave-dwelling animals that are never experienced the sunlight. Therefore,
right.
By definition, we can assume that they use that sunlight to govern their behavior. If they're nocturnal, they use the presence of the sunlight to govern when they need to hide to escape that sunlight.
Yes.
Etc.
100%. Yep. I'm just going to tell you that that's what they do. So we don't have to assume anything. That's just what they do.
Right. Yeah. So to prevent them of that circadian rhythm is quite simply neglect, if not abuse, because that
Correct.
is simply a very basic thing that they would be exposed to in nature that governs a lot of their behavior.
Yeah.
We've seen, unfortunately, a lot of comments arguing with us about they don't like light, they don't need light, nothing pertaining to their behavior has anything to do with light, and quite simply that is completely false on a very basic biological understanding.
Yeah, like they'll survive. Yeah, your animals will be out. Well, sure, but like your animals will be visible because they're in perpetual darkness. Like they're confused. Your animals are not living a natural, normal life. They don't have those sensory cues happening to them on a daily basis. So like, yeah, you'll see them.
It's completely unnatural.
Yeah. So photo period, guys.
Martinique,
10 to 12 hours a day.
Yes. Martinique is a very equatorial area. They experience, an average of 12 hours of daylight. Yeah. So that's typically what we aim for. Although when we provide supplemental lighting, we usually like to set those lights to start a little bit after the natural sunrise, with the natural lighting coming in through windows, and set those lights to go off a little bit before the natural sunset as well.
And so, hold on a second. So I want to comment on that too, because I think there's a misunderstanding there. Like in nature, the lights don't simply turn on and they don't simply turn off. Like there is a gradual effect that happens. And these animals, I'm going to tell you right now, 100% respond to that gradual ascension and descension of the light. Okay. So after the sun comes up, turn your lights on. But prior to the sun setting, turn your lights off.
Right.
All right. Awesome.
Yes. Sunrise and sunset with twilight. Sure. Whatever. Solar. Wow. That is really getting into the nitty gritty.
And here's the thing too, guys. I'm gonna be honest. Like, we're only sharing with you information that's like within our understanding, but like all of these things, all these, I'm sure all of this plays a role in how the animals behave, but like wind direction, all of that stuff, like as far as pheromones go and mating and all of that, like, let's be real, like
beach pool score.
Anyway.
Okay.
Anyway.
So those are a few of the parameters that we're primarily focusing on when we're going to aim for some sort of parameters in captivity.
Are you able to Google some images, like habitat photos, or at least show them something of?
Maybe, I guess so. Like where?
Type in that locale, and then no. So here's something we know about versicolor is they are known by the locals. I'm going to embarrass myself.
Matutu feliz, maybe.
Sure. We know that is what the people who are native to Martinique call this animal. Okay. And so this is a cool thing. If you YouTube this, you'll see lots of interesting footage of these things interacting with people in their homes and all sorts of funny things.
That word or that phrase loosely translates to like cliff spider or something. Cliff crab. Something.
Doesn't matter.
But yeah.
But this is a good way to look at all these in situ photos. I mean, this is super neat. People interacting with them, tourists interacting with them, probably mature males in search of females.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a wild
This is Martinique.
Okay. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, look at another foliage.
There's a good one.
Yeah, so it's cool to know this stuff, you guys, because this is the animal that you're putting in your box to enjoy and play with. Like, this is where it comes from. This is where it has evolved to thrive. Okay, this is its home, which is beautiful. So it's cool to see these things and then get an idea of when you're building your enclosure, right? Now, yes, there's going to be inevitably a million people that are like, I don't do any of that, and the animal's fine. Awesome. good for you. That's not what we're about, and that's not what we're promoting. Okay, we're just simply looking at what happens. And guys, if you replicate a lot of this stuff as far as heating and lighting goes, the animals, I promise you, these spiders will respond to it. Now, I think we should talk about, are we ready to talk about maybe you have to cool them?
Sure.
Right. So like,
we're still talking about natural history.
Yeah. So when it comes to these spiders, like they have a set parameter, right? Meeting that parameter doesn't mean you're going to have to put lamps on them or heat pads or anything. Like, think about where you live. What are your parameters? So we've gathered this information, right? We've gathered the information about the versicolor. We have a fairly good idea about the parameters that it's exposed to. Now we answer the question, how do we match that? We know where it's going to go, right? We know where it's going to go in our home. We know where we live. Mm-hmm. How do we match that? That doesn't mean heating elements. That doesn't mean lamps, pads.
How is our local climate relevant to those parameters that we want to set?
Right.
As
maybe
goals?
You live in Arizona or Central America or wherever, right? Like maybe you have to cool your room to meet those parameters. And where we think heating elements really come into play, and again, we use a lot of lamps. We use a lot of grow lights and halogen bulbs on dimmer switches. But maybe that involves cooling the ambient temperature and then giving them some sort of lamp or a pad or something to give them that gradient to respond to. Again, they respond to it. Okay, they behave just like they do. I don't even know why we're talking about this, but they do. So maybe that's what that means. It doesn't mean blast them with heat. That could be bad, right? That's how accidents happen. And you do cook your spider, right? So that's why like having a thermometer and having a heat gun and all those things are very relevant, because right? When you go to your thermostat in your house, you see a number and you adjust your thermostat to meet a number. The animals really aren't different, like, because that's what they've evolved to thrive in, right? So meeting that parameter, that's up to you. Okay, that we're not here to tell you like, yes, you must do heating elements. It's just like heating elements are a useful tool to meet those parameters for a lot of keepers in the US. Okay. And we're not done with this series. We're going to keep going on that. But
and just to reiterate, we're never aiming for a specific temperature, even though we have these numbers here right on the screen as a guideline.
Right.
These are more literally just a guideline. We see that the temperatures rise every single day throughout the year, well above what we consider room temperature, and therefore we can infer reasonably that it is more natural to provide those spiders in captivity with those same parameters. We can also talk really quick about how the definition of an ectotherm means simply that it uses heat as a form of generating metabolism. We've seen a lot of sort of criticism that says, how do you know that heat is good for them? How can you even prove that heat is good for them?
Supplemental heating.
Supplemental heating, yes, above room temperature.
Right.
But it's not something that we ourselves need to set out to prove, because it's like a basic definition of an ectotherm that they use heat to stimulate their metabolism. Yeah. So naturally, if a species like Caribbean versicolor is exposed to the choice of up to 88 degrees Fahrenheit in the middle of September.
More, pictures?
Absolutely. That means that species has evolved for probably tens of millions of years in that environment to take advantage of those temperatures to stimulate their metabolism.
And here's
plain and simple.
And here's the other thing, guys. Like, they do it in captivity. They mirror that behavior when you give them those parameters.
You find some verses.
Like, they bask, right? They here's some verses. It doesn't even have to be a versicolor.
This is a gravid female versicolor. She probably hadn't yet produced eggs at this point, but she probably was gravid, and she was.
Well, so hold on. So I want to talk. I want to take advantage of this. So like. Yeah. We notice, and if you haven't done any of this, then maybe you don't know. Maybe you pull their eggs and incubate them in a warmer temperature somewhere else. It doesn't matter. But we are telling you that their behavior changes when they are going to molt, or B, when females are brooding or are getting ready to lay eggs.
Which would both be considered moments when they need to generate energy.
Correct.
In some way other than just eating.
Right. And without giving them this thought out choice, this thermal gradient, they wouldn't have the ability to do that. Now, maybe they would molt successfully, have eggs successfully, but behaviorally, they are responding to the stimulus just as they would in nature. That's what we're saying. Okay. If you don't want to do that, that's on you. Congratulations. Good for you. But stop telling people to ignore that. Let's go ahead and show them that. There's another one basking, right? And this is typical. You'll see the abdomen exposed where a lot of the metabolic process occurs. You'll see it exposed in the direction of the heat source.
This particular individual, I think, was 1 or 2 weeks post-molt. So this is an interesting behavior too. This was post-molt.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead and show them the AVIC picture.
Oh, this one?
Yeah, that one. Do we have one of us taking temp of that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, we did. It was roughly 85, right? Go ahead and show them the picture. Okay. So we posted about this, but this is a avicularia, common pinktail, clearly with an egg sac. And we observed this behavior for every day for about a month, 2 months.
Yes, it was. We didn't start seeing it until approximately 28 to 30 days after she laid that egg sac. She began doing this, and then she did it for another consistent, I think, 34 days ish.
And what you can't see in the picture is this is a very long tube. This enclosure is a 12 by 12 by 18, and she's got well within a 12 to 15 degree gradient within that tube, right? Which is something we always try to give. And what we found is that, like, she would do this. She would present her egg sac at the warmest spot we gave her. That was it. That was the warmest spot that she was able to have access to within the confines of that tube where she could safely rear her egg sac. So after that, we made changes to her husbandry because while this behavior has been documented by German arachnologist Volker. Check them out.
They're a posted research team.
Yes. Yep. And so they've said that in the wild, animals will do this as well. We saw this as we are not giving this animal within the confines of her space a warm enough temperature to brood her egg sac. Okay, that's what we saw. Okay. Now, if we posted this picture online, people would be like, oh, get rid of the lamp, get rid of this, get rid of that, and all this shit. Okay. But like, that's not what the behavior is telling us. She's rearing eggs, right? So we modified our husbandry based on what the animal was saying.
Right. To elaborate a little bit more.
Sure.
Again, for the first 28 to 30 days or so, she was completely hidden, completely safe at the bottom of her cork tube. We didn't see her out exposing the egg sac like that. But after that 30 to 32 days, she intentionally brought it up to the warmest spot within her cork tube like that. So that very distinct change in behavior was something that we needed to notice and act on, because it was a change in behavior. That drastic change in behavior there's something to interpret from that.
Right. You're right. Yep. So small caveat there. Anyway. Okay. So
let's see if I have other Versi pictures. Oh, there's a good one.
Yeah, there she is. That's a male.
No, that's a female.
Is it?
Yeah. That was post-molt, it looks like.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So you're right. So a lot of animals post-molt will do that. Again, think about the metabolic process. Think about how much energy it takes to molt, right? That is, we all know that's a very stressful, very involved time for the animal, right? So it makes sense to give them the opportunity to warm their bodies after that. They've depleted their energy in molting.
Right.
Right? So
while they're regaining, while their carapace is hardening, all that whatnot, while they can't eat, since typically heat and consuming energy are the two ways that ectotherms generate energy.
Correct.
While they're recovering, heat is a very good way to help boost their metabolism.
Yep. And again, we're just meeting a set of parameters. How you go about doing that might involve air conditioning. It might involve heat. I don't know, guys. But like, it's just giving them that choice just really seems to make a lot of sense when you watch their behaviors and how they're responding to that stimulus. Okay. And if you don't do it and you have success, great. We're not talking about that. Okay. Just stop saying that.
All right.
Okay.
Let's go back.
Okay. All right.
So anyway, we used WeatherSpark as a source if we ever need to go back and reference those, yearly climate references. Weather.com is always a good resource for the current weather. We used a lot of Google Photos for looking at what the habitat looks like.
Look at the textures.
Notice how wet that looks.
A lot of moss.
Tropical.
Moss does not grow unless it's real wet, guys.
Yes.
Just throwing that out there.
Yes.
But again, it's that balance between airflow and moisture. Okay. And if you don't understand that, that's okay. That's okay.
Yes. Humidity and precipitation. We're not going to get too much into that with our heat and light series in part 2, but we will in later videos.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, pertaining to temperature, versicolor is a really simple example because they don't have much seasonal variation. They're in an equatorial endemic, to the Lesser Antilles, particularly to Martinique and I believe Guadalupe, right?
Yes.
Yes, which is
same
region, so it's
South America.
So it likely experiences relatively the same yearly conditions as Martinique.
Boom. Okay, moving on. We're done with that species. Guys, it's simple. There's the parameters. It's very simple.
Yes.
Good stuff.
Yes.
Okay. So what do you want to do now?
We can talk about, it's been 51 minutes. You want to talk about Metallica for another? So
we are going to talk about Poecilotheria metallica, but I want to talk about us. I want to talk about you and I and our experience and I know. But I think it's important because I don't think a lot of people really understand where we're coming from too. I want to talk about our experience with AZA. So
what is the AZA?
AZA is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. Okay.
It is the highest governing body of zoological institutions in the United States.
Yes.
And other countries.
Yes. So they govern. There's a set of rules.
Standards.
Sure. That run a zoo. Right, you want to be accredited by AZA. Doesn't matter. So we were both working for zoos. Jessica's worked for name your zoos.
Potter Park Zoo and Detroit Zoo.
Where are those at?
Potter Park Zoo is in Lansing, Michigan. AZA accredited. Detroit Zoo's in Detroit, also AZA accredited.
Okay. I also worked for Detroit Zoo. That's where I was most recently. I also worked for Fort Worth Zoo at the Museum of Living Art, working with ectotherms. And I also worked at the Omaha's and Henry Doorly Zoo, an aquarium. I was a summer keeper there, working with ectotherms in Nebraska. Believe it or not, there's a world-class zoo there. Who knew?
It's the only thing they got.
That's all I got. Seriously, that's all I got. The food's good too, but that's all I got. Go there. It's awesome. So I worked in the Desert Dome there with ectotherms, and then I worked in the amphibian conservation area, which is not open to the public, for quite a while before I left for Detroit Zoo, which was back home. Michigan's home for both of us, right?
And before that, you can talk about your schooling, but I did go to Michigan State University and got my bachelor's of science in zoology. To expand a little bit on that, I didn't learn a ton about zoology itself. I learned a little bit in college based on zoology, but it was more the attitude of critical thinking that I took into my career after graduating. Critical thinking, I think, is a huge component to learning, advancing scientific thought, scientific practices, criticizing previous things, evolving from that. And I think we'll get into that a little bit at the end of our video. But
no, we can get into it now. Yeah, man. Here's the thing, guys. In zoos and aquariums, especially working with herps, ectotherms, it's a standard. You're criticized every day. Okay. And that's where we came from. So the approach to working with herps and establishing the baseline temperature is we didn't look at care sheets. We didn't consult with anyone else. It was just where do they come from? What happens where they live?
Right. Anybody can say you can raise a leopard gecko at 65 degrees, but where are they getting that information from other than their own experience, which has its own value, sure, but you need to also question, where does that come from?
Yeah. No matter what you're hearing, no matter even what you're hearing from us, you guys, like you as a keeper, like you're clearly interested in animals, right? Like you're here, you want to keep animals, you like these spiders, you like the natural world. So think critically, because nothing in nature is as simple as shoebox, bone dry, water dish, overflow the water dish
once a
week, this many times, feed them this many times. Like that doesn't fucking work. Like that's not how it works, you guys. So let's throw that out the window. And anyway, I'm not saying, well, no. I'm not saying that you shouldn't listen to what other keepers have to say, but like,
yes,
always be critical.
Taking one person's anecdotal experience as gospel is not it.
Not even what we say. Okay, like
it's not smart.
Nope, don't do it. So what are we talking about?
Experience? Your background, yes.
Okay, so also when I was at Omaha, I was very fortunate enough to be scooped up by a wonderful man who saw my potential. He knew I needed a job. I interned for a year with no pay, trying to get a job, and he pulled me aboard, and he's like, I can't pay you, but do you want to work on a project that involves saving frogs in Honduras? I said, fuck yeah. Yeah, of course I do. I had worked for a company called Josh's Frogs prior. I knew a little bit about amphibians. So I wanted to pursue that. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world I had ever seen. And so
there we go.
Is that it? Okay. So there I am. I'm in situ in Honduras, working for the institution I was working for. That is a Plectrohyla dasypus. Plectrohyla exquisita. I am so sorry. Oh my God. Goodness. I hope they don't see this. Plectrohyla exquisita, which is native. Zoom back into its feet. That animal is native to a hill. It's native to a specific cloud forest. It is endemic. It occurs only in one spot in Honduras, and that's it. That's the only place that animal's found. And so when I went there, I finally worked my ass off enough, and they felt so bad for me. They're like, come to Honduras with us. Let's see all your hard work pay off. You've been working to retrofit these mobile laboratories. Come see the frogs. Okay, thank you. So I did. I went to Honduras, and the first animal I saw was a tarantula. The very first animal in a montane environment, a cloud forest. It's undescribed, 100%. Didn't get a picture of it, but I did some research. It was a gray Grammostola pulchra looking. You're not gonna find any pictures of it, but it's native to that mountain range. It's undescribed. It was out in the day basking with its butt in the air, and I knew nothing about spiders. I wasn't even there for spiders. I was there for frogs. But it's just if you know anything about montane environments, it's very cool. But the sun's very hot. But when I went there, my whole goal was, we're going to breed these amphibians. We have no idea. They're dying of a chytrid. Of a fungus, chytrid fungus. They're endemic to this place. They're really special. We're going to research them. We're going to bring them into captivity. We're going to clear them up. We're going to clean them of the disease, and we're going to save these damn frogs. Right? That's what we're going to do. And so here we are. We found one. But the point is, I spent hours up all night watching these frogs interact with their native environment alongside spiders, right? And the short of it is like, unless you're there seeing how these animals truly react to the environment and like what happens there, like you don't have any concept of it. It doesn't matter what anyone says. Like, it's so complex and there's so much going on. It's miserable most of the time, at least in montane environments. Anyway, the point is, there's a lot to it, guys. And so that's where we're coming from. When we're talking to you about all this, you're like, who cares? It's like, that's our background, and our goal was to breed endangered animals, right? To maintain them and to give them a better life.
Endangered and protected animals.
Right. And so that's where we're coming from. That's our background. That's why we're so passionate about this. That's why we're so annoying about this.
Do you want to get into Metallica?
Let's talk about Metallica really quick. Again, this is the species that made martial arachnids. We love them. And I came across, you can find this yourself. I don't know whose work this is. This is not my work. I think this was a hobbyist. But if you read this, through all my research, I found this. And And again, this was what inspired me to consider all these changes. And this person had a very well thought out approach, and it worked. So let's talk about Metallica real quick. We want to give a shout out to Andrew Smith.
Oh, yes.
If you don't know who Andrew Smith is,
which one?
I don't know, all of them.
Okay.
Start with that one. Andrew Smith of lovetarantulas.com. This man and his crew, they're doing amazing things, and we don't think that people acknowledge them enough. They are, is it documentarians? Is that the right word? They're from the UK, Europe. I'm going to butcher this. Man, I'm going to butcher this.
And before we get into this, we do have permission to use all of these photos.
Yep.
He did give us express permission to use these photos with his logo.
Yes, he did. And I cannot wait for his work to come out, because clearly what you see in this video is a natural in situ photo of these spiders in a natural tree, their home tree. This is where they live. And I'm so excited for him to elaborate on this. But this species is from India. Research will tell you the Nalamala Hills, I think is how they call it, which is, forest. I think that shares, it's a very unsafe place. Okay. That's why not a lot of people go there. And I'm sure he'll tell you this in the documentary. And notice the hill in the background. I want everyone to look at the hill in the background. So clearly they are at an elevation, which means that when you look up India temperatures, it is unbearable. Like, it's scorching, right? For most of the year. Because again, geographically speaking, it would be a desert if not for the monsoon season. Okay.
Another, just real quick, another really useful resource that I've found when looking into and when looking into type localities for certain tarantulas is the IUCN Red List.
Because most of these animals, this is
website's not working.
Perfect timing.
But
they're endangered from deforestation and logging.
Yes. They are evaluated by the IUCN. A lot of Brachypelma species are also evaluated by the IUCN, and they will show you exactly where they occur in their native habitats as well.
I just got to say, a lot of people would be very surprised about the habitat of Brachypelma.
Yes. Oh my God, we're not even going to get into that.
No, but you need to look at that. Okay. I just want you to see that. Same with Chromatopelma.
Yeah.
Do your research on that one.
Anyway. Nalamala Forest is
it's a hill.
It's not unique in the mainland India part of the continent. A lot of the continent undergoes the same sort of seasonal variations, right?
Yeah.
But Metallica in particular seems to really capitalize on those extremes.
Well, I think they're isolated.
Yeah.
And Andrew Smith, I'm sure, will elaborate on this.
Yeah.
They're isolated to a pocket of the region. But it does undergo the same craziness that the rest of look at that beautiful animal. That is just awesome. But let's show them some of our captive pictures of the animals. So you can do all of this, and we encourage everyone to do this. I know a lot of people like Metallica. They're a beautiful animal. They're super. We find them easier to keep than New World species. That whole genus, quite frankly, is super easy to keep. If you provide them with the right retreat, okay. A common misconception is that the Poecilotheria genus are very photosensitive. Okay, that is not true. They are very sensitive, and an indicator of this is the coloration, at least on Metallica. They are very sensitive to changes in their environment. They're very sensitive. They're very aware of the world around them. They're very sensitive to...
especially rapid changes.
Right. And again, their coloration is a dead giveaway. Maybe there's a bird that predates on them or something. But it is a very unnatural occurrence to just, again, turn the light on. Right, turn the light on, and now the animal is exposed, and the animal has to react. That's unnatural, right? They're not photosensitive. Look at these animals. They don't care. There's plenty of photos of them basking.
This is a penultimate male, probably just a few weeks before he molted to adulthood. Clearly utilizing a very hot
the basking spot
I think I do have a photo of the surface temp. Maybe I don't. Yeah, this one. There. 95 degrees surface temp. Anyway.
Where that animal was sitting. Mm-hmm. Now, guys, I have to say it. Okay. I just have to. If you do this incorrectly, if you put any random heat lamp without measuring, you could hurt your spider. Okay. Like, this is common sense, guys. We took care to measure the output of that element. It's on a dimmer switch. We measured like all these things before the animal was exposed to it, right? And the animal responded just as we thought it would. We don't have the issues of the animals burning themselves. I've never lost an animal to a burn. I've never lost an animal to anything related to do with heating elements. Okay, we talked about that in part one. Yeah.
Anyway, this was prior to molting. He was clearly utilizing that warmth.
Can we show some references for the temperatures in Nandio? That's what
Nandio.
Yeah, and then I want to show them geographically where that is in relation to, because I can't find exact temperatures of where Metallica reside. All I can do is I have access to the nearest. Look at that.
Crazy seasonal.
Notice the
changes.
Low. Okay, and this is consistent with that picture we showed you at the beginning of the video. Look at these changes. Okay, so like a lot of people have success keeping Metallica at room temperature and lower, right? And that's why the animals are going to survive. But man, when you give them that heat, they're just like on it like moth to a flame. You know, like they love it.
Even in the coolest part of their season, their daily high temps don't fall below average anyway, 88 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's something to note. That's the
lowest.
That's an average high.
Right. Average high.
So obviously that's what's happening during the day.
Average high,
right.
Yeah.
So you have a 20 degree temperature. Now that's important, you guys. Notice that difference because that matters. It's like 20 degrees from day to night.
Yes.
Right. So letting them get that low is.
It's not natural.
Right. Well,
we can't.
They can get that low, but the thing is that it changes. Right. It changes the next day.
Right.
Right. So it's like, yeah, they're fine. But like, that's so unnatural to not give them that dramatic rise, you know? I don't know. I don't think there's a white person in India that's not like, this is incredibly uncomfortable. Like any time of the year, you know what I mean?
And that's just temperatures.
So, yeah.
Let's find rainfall. It's actually lower than I expected it to be. Let's see. Average monthly rainfall.
Well,
it's still a good
when
chance.
You look at that, that's huge. Again, guys, we're talking about ectotherms here. Like, and you have to remember too, like the prey items and the things that predate upon the animals, like they're all governed by the same rules of the environment. So all of those things are going to be governed by the temperatures and the rainfall. Like that all plays a factor in behavior and things that we should consider in captivity. That's all I'm saying. Yep. Okay. So hot. They like it hot.
Yes. So this individual, I want to complete this before we forget about it. But yes, this individual is a penultimate male, taking advantage of that heat before he molted. And this was about 2 days later.
Boom. He molted in the same spot.
Utilizing that heat. Yep.
And I don't think we've talked about this, but the ambient temperatures in the room, not in the enclosure, in the room at the time of this were 76 degrees. It was 76 degrees in the room. Okay. I just want you guys to think about that real quick.
Right. And this spider was choosing to come. This picture doesn't really show it very well, but he had a very elaborate webbed structure behind this piece of wood here where he could have chosen to hide if that temperature or that situation was sufficient for him. But he actually did come out freshly molted, probably 2 days post molt, to utilize those warmer temperatures.
I want to say something too. Like the device we're using to provide this heat is like a modern advancement. I can't even believe I'm saying this, but like it's new. And what is neat about halogen is it provides a very focused, tight beam of heat. Okay, so and you can adjust it, right? So we wouldn't just slap a 125 watt mercury vapor or metal halide on this enclosure to provide them with these parameters, right? We just wouldn't do that, right? We took into account the technology that we have access to, and we gave them a very small focus of heat that was relevant to the size of the enclosure. Right? Okay,
Right.
perfect. Okay.
Let's see. Any other good? Here's another good example. This is also a penultimate male. I don't have a photo post molt, but this is a great example of him warming his booty prior to molting.
And that's not with a traditional heat lamp.
Right.
That is with the 25 watt grow lights that we use.
Yes, still utilizing that thermal gradient in a 12 by 12 by 18 inch tall enclosure.
No, that's 8 by 8 by 12.
No, he was in a 16 or a 12, 12, 18.
Okay.
What else? We have plenty of photos of Metallica utilizing.
Again, like we choose to focus on these species because it's, we just, oh, that one's good.
Yes.
That's mama to our most recent clutch right there, clearly recovering. Or no.
Was this? I think this was...
Look up. There's babies right there.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. See, she's basking with her babies.
Yep.
Again, ambient temperature is 76 degrees Fahrenheit in the room. Where she's sitting, probably 98 degrees.
All the babies are choosing to come out of that easily 16 plus inch tall cork tube to sit right under that heat lamp.
Right. And I think we're using a heating element to heat the room to the baseline temperature. So anyway.
Here's that same individual mama. That was right after she molted. Again, probably 1 or 2 days post molt, coming out of hiding in that really tall tube to utilize those warmer temps towards the top.
Guys, notice a trend here is that the animals A, have the option, but B, like if they want to leave, they can. If they want to be not visible, they can be. Right. So again, guys, this comes back to choice, giving your animals the option to choose. Just because they're primitive spiders doesn't mean they don't have the option to choose in nature, right? And that doesn't mean that they won't respond to that same choice in captivity, because they do. I'm telling you, they do. So anyway, yeah, that's using some grow lights. Those are grow lights. I think I have a picture of how warm it was where the animal was sitting right there.
Sun, yeah.
Yep.
90
look at
degrees
that.
Surface temp.
So anyway, this is just food for thought. This is just how we have done things historically. We feel very passionate about, we've been criticized lately about our approach. And we stand by what we said and how we need to rethink how we're keeping these spiders in captivity. There's simply more to them. They are primitive animals, but the way they interact with their environment is more complex than what we're giving them credit for. They do respond to the stimuli that we provide them in captivity, if that includes heat and light. And that's what we're saying. And we're far from done from this. There's so many intricacies in making this work, and we're just getting started. And thank you guys if you've stuck through with us. Appreciate it. Let me see, make sure I didn't miss anything. I think we're going to do a lot more live streams because this is just easier for me to just talk. I hate that stand in front of the camera and cut and paste, and I suck. This is just easier for me to just have a conversation with you guys. So I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to do more of that. So
yeah. Something that we need to reiterate, probably with every subsequent video that we do, is that just because we're presenting information that XYZ is beneficial to your spiders, and we're showing you evidence to prove that, we're not saying that if you don't do that it is detrimental to your spiders. We've
Correct.
Received quite a bit of criticism that is sort of very defensive. It's like, well, I don't do that and my spiders are just fine.
Yeah, we've heard the whole I've done this for 30 years and
yeah,
great. Yeah,
right. And we're not criticizing that method of care. We're simply demonstrating, trying to show as much evidence as we can, both with our experience, our spiders, and as well as
animal science,
showing peer-reviewed publications on that.
Which you can find in our part 1.
Right. We're just saying that we can show you evidence that providing more natural parameters, which usually involves supplemental heating,
in most cases,
is beneficial. Like by definition. It's not.
Google the definition of poikilotherm right now. Right now, do it, because that's what these spiders are. Okay.
And just to summarize real quick.
Yes.
A poikilotherm is a type of ectotherm.
Right.
Poikilotherms don't just sit in their environment and let their environment completely govern their body temperature. A poikilotherm actually modifies its behavior to utilize the natural temperatures that they experience in the wild to modify their body temperature.
Yeah, while still being a product of the environment.
Right,
but
which is like
they move.
Basking, right, hiding, burrowing, yeah. All of those things. A poikilotherm does all of those things to modify its body temperature depending on what it needs to do for its metabolism. A tarantula is by definition a poikilotherm. Therefore, we can infer that they modify their behavior to modify their body temperature. Again, by definition, then we can infer that keeping them at the same consistent temperature daily and year-round is not natural for them, and it could even be detrimental for them.
Right.
Or at least giving them a thermal gradient is beneficial to them.
Yeah, guys, and here's the thing too, like all of us doing this, we're all just sharing our experience. And us giving our animals thermal gradients and heat, like we're very successful at reproducing our animals. And we have less than a 1% mortality rate. We don't give a shit if you buy our products or not. Like, we prefer you to do that, but you don't have to. But we really care about these animals, and facts are first, no matter what. And that's because we are zookeepers at heart. We are zoologists at heart. And so keep it in mind. That's all we're saying. And if you want to dismiss it, go for it.
Just have a critical viewpoint 100%. Of everything.
Yep.
Everything. In summary, let's go into what are we going to do? Part 3.
Yep. Okay. So moving forward with this series, we are going to break this down piece by piece. We were foolish to think in part 1 we were just going to do all this in one video. It turned out to be insane, and we were very incorrect. So the next video, which we've already filmed, we are going to talk about specifically heating the room and the elements that you can use to do that. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of just heating the room as opposed to like in-tank thermal gradients and whatnot, because we think that is something to talk about. That's often recommended, right? Yeah, heating the room with either a space heater or what have you. So we're going to talk about that.
Part 3, yes. We're going to go into heating the room.
After that, we will talk about each subsequent element.
Yes.
Because we think each element needs to be discussed.
There will be multiple parts.
Yeah, and this is not just going to end right away, because it can't. It can't.
Right.
Right.
Yes. Please always feel free to contact us. Any method of contact that you prefer: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, email, our website contact form. If you have any questions, any questions, feedback, criticism, all of it, we want to hear it. We want the conversation to continue.
Yep.
We don't want to dismiss any thought, whether it's right, wrong, unsubstantiated, anything. We want the conversation to continue. We don't want to dismiss anything as yes. So yeah, we want to keep the conversation going. Let us know how you feel about it.
We don't care. we heard about it every day as zookeepers, guys. Like, are you kidding me? We give ourselves so much shit. And we heard it from our coworkers, and guys,
yes.
It's about the animals here. So give it to us for sure.
Yeah, let us know how you guys think about it. Part 3 is filmed. We should be finished, hopefully.
It's going to be the boring cut and paste, and
much more professional and pretty.
And I hate it. Who cares?
Anyway, that'll hopefully be done and published by next week. You can subscribe to be notified when that comes via our YouTube page. Is that it? You got anything else?
Nope. We love you guys, and thanks so much. Let us know. See you soon.